Good Thursday afternoon, everybody, and thanks for being with us here on KXAN Live. I'm Will Dupree in the KXAN Live studio. Right now, we're going to go to a meeting of the Public Utility Commission of Texas, where the chairman of that body, Peter Lake, is going to speak alongside the new CEO and president of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT. That new CEO just started on October 1st, and his name is Pablo Vegas. Let's listen in as this news conference gets underway, and we'll wrap it up at the end.
Review of the grid performance over this most recent summer. Most importantly, Pablo, we're very, very glad to have you.
Thank you.
Before I turn it over to Pablo, I do want to talk about the process the new independent board went through to find Pablo, and of course, highlight some of his outstanding qualifications. As you all know, Senate Bill 2 established a new independent board at ERCOT, and that has been seated with a outstanding group of high caliber business executives from across Texas. And that board was also required by Senate Bill 2 to utilize an executive search firm. They used a global firm of high repute. And it took a while, but the board is confident that we've got the right person, and we're thrilled to have him. Pablo has extensive experience in all elements of grid operations. He has a very impressive background in both the electricity and natural gas sectors. And importantly, he also has a strong background in IT and technology, which was a key focus for the board in their search process, and as you know, is a key part of ERCOT operations. It was a long but thorough and deliberate process, and like I said, the board is thrilled to have found the right guy for the job. Pablo?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. First off, I want to say, thank you for the warm welcome. I want to thank everybody for the warm welcome that I've had over the last couple of weeks. It's been a really great way to come back to the state of Texas, something that I'm excited to have the opportunity to do, as is my family. So I'm thrilled to be taking this new role, leading ERCOT. Absolutely thrilled. It's a long-standing, incredible organization with a team of people that are dedicated to continuing to serve Texans and to continuing to make sure that the electric grid remains reliable for all businesses and all families in Texas. The main things I'm focusing on here in the short term, making sure that, one, I want to get to know this new team. Looking forward to getting to know the leadership and the frontline workforce at ERCOT, make sure that I can offer them the support that they need to continue to reliably operate the grid and meet all the expectations that you have for ERCOT. In addition, we're very focused on making sure that the Phase 1 blueprint implementation of market reforms are going well, that are continuing to perform. We can see the benefit of those reforms already over the course of this last year. The weatherization changes that have been made helped get through a strong winter. We are seeing the benefits of that. We're seeing the benefits of how outage scheduling is being done across the state. Being able to plan that out in a way that allows the staggering of those maintenance windows so that we can make sure we've got reliable generation always ready to serve. We're going to be seeing the benefit of a firm fuel product coming out here in a couple months. Exciting changes that are already having an impact on the reliability of the grid, and so I'm continuing to make sure that we're executing and operating to meet those expectations. Then looking ahead, looking forward to getting to work on the implementation of the Phase 2 work. And so the market redesign that's going to represent the next major iteration of the ERCOT market is something that's going to be coming here in the next couple of months. So I'm looking forward to working with the chairman, the rest of the commission, and the state legislature to make sure that we meet all the expectations of what came out of Senate Bill 3. So that'll be a big focus in the coming months. But overall, just excited to be coming back to Texas, excited to be in this important role, and looking forward to taking any of your questions as well.
Thank you, Pablo. I appreciate you laying out many of the reforms that have been put in place. Pablo takes over the ERCOT grid at a time when it is more reliable than ever. Many of the reforms he mentioned and many others have ensured that the lights have stayed on. This past winter, we had an unusually cold winter, lots of snow and ice, and never entered into emergency conditions. This summer, of course, was a summer with many, many new records for demand on the electricity grid. Over 30 daily, weekly, monthly records for demand for electricity, in addition to 11 new all-time records for demand on the ERCOT grid. And the ERCOT grid met all of those challenges without ever getting into emergency conditions. Not once did we get into emergency conditions. And that's all against the background of a record-setting summer in terms of heat, in addition to the increasing population and growing economy. More and more demand on our grid for more electricity. ERCOT and the grid rose to meet each of those challenges. Pablo mentioned the maintenance scheduling control that ERCOT now has. That's another new reform that was in place this fall. And in addition, the Public Utility Commission recently passed the second round of weatherization requirements to ensure that our generation and transmission assets are fully hardened against whatever conditions Mother Nature throws at us. So thrilled to see the reforms we put in place are continuing to work. We will continue to enhance reliability with our Phase 2 market designs. And most importantly, very glad to have Pablo on board as our new CEO. Happy to take any questions.
Mr. Vegas, many Texans will remain scarred by and skeptical of the grid reliability for years to come. How will you rebuild that trust?
So the key is going to be continued reliable execution. So what the chairman has pointed out in terms of the performance over this past summer, achieving reliable operations over extreme weather conditions, that's how you continue to build trust. We have to continue to see that happen. Yesterday, we set a new record for the month of October, reached the highest energy demand ever in an October day yesterday, and the grid performed reliably. So we continue to be tested. We continue to pass those tests. That's how we rebuild the trust and the faith in the reliability of the electric grid.
First of all, do we know if there's any more either coal or natural gas generation projects coming onto the system? And the second part is, are you confident that the Phase 2 market redesign will incentivize more of that to come?
I'm not aware of any major natural gas or coal plants. There are a few smaller natural gas resources that are in the process of coming on board. To answer your first question, the second question is yes, absolutely. The Phase 2 of market redesign absolutely will incentivize new generation, new steel in the ground. That is the task we were given by the legislature, and we will deliver on that.
Brad Jones had put out the idea of having what he called a gas test, something like an independent market monitor for natural gas. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So the gas, we've worked very well with the natural gas industry since the reforms were passed by the legislature. We had coordination with outages and natural gas supply chain and outages in place by the end of last November, so that was ready to go for this most recent winter. We've worked very well with both the Railroad Commission and industry partners in the natural gas industry in the State Operations Center and in TURC to ensure continuity of operations for both the gas side and the power generation side. Both the Railroad Commission, PUC, and the gas and power industries worked hand in hand to create the critical natural gas supply chain map, which was delivered last April. So we've had a great working relationship with both the Railroad Commission and the natural gas industry over the last 16, 18 months, and look forward to continuing that. And we'll always continue to look for ways to enhance reliability in both sides of the equation.
I was asking Mr. Vegas, do you think that there's some sort of possibility that we might have more transparency in the actual day-to-day production of natural gas now at the grid?
All of the things that the chairman mentioned are focused on reliable operations. And so the exchange of operational information that's relevant to whether gas is going to be available for a gas plant that needs it, and if the supply is when you think about maintenance schedules, outages, things like that, operational parameters that help for planning and forecasting, that's the kind of information that we are talking about sharing between the electric grid and with the natural gas operators. That kind of information, I think, makes a lot of sense. I know I've seen a willingness for the industry to share information that's helpful in ensuring reliability. So I think we'll continue to work with them, continue to find ways to regularly share information that's helpful on both sides to operate reliably.
I have a question. There were reports this summer of maintenance being delayed at power plants to keep the lights on, and you mentioned that we had another record-breaking day yesterday. Is maintenance being done on these power plants, or is maintenance still being delayed due to record-breaking heat?
Maintenance is absolutely being performed, and as we saw going into the summer and throughout the summer, our fleet was ready to meet all of the many record-setting demand days that we had. But the control of the maintenance schedules of our fleet of generators is one of the important reforms that we've put in place since the winter storm, and that ensures that, unlike in the past when generators just picked whatever day or week they wanted to be out, and you could have days where there was a huge amount of generators out, and we now can spread those outages over a longer period of time. So there's no single day or single week where we have an unusually high number of outages. And so that's just one of the another piece of the puzzle that ensures reliability and helps keep our grid strong.
So maintenance isn't being delayed, it's just being scheduled?
Sometimes it may be delayed or accelerated based on the conditions, but the bottom line is we're working with our generator partners to make sure that not only do they have the time to maintain their machinery, but that they are also available when we need them the most. Sometimes we move them a week behind, sometimes we move them forward if we see tight conditions on the horizon. But the bottom line is the generator fleet is being maintained, albeit under a different paradigm, now under the direction of ERCOT. And those generators are ready and able to perform when we need them, as we saw this last summer.
So here in Austin Energy customers are facing their first base rate increase in a decade, which the City Council votes on today. Austin Energy officials have said that part of the increase is due to the grid redesign, which has driven up costs. So how would you say ERCOT's operations tie into these rate increases for Austin Energy?
So certainly can't speak to the local decisions made at the Austin city level, but in context of the cost of increased reliability operations at ERCOT, to date, the total additional reliable operations between expanded reserves for a greater margin of safety, getting more generators on sooner rather than later, all of those operational changes have cost on average $1.25 per household per month. And as a result of those improvements in operations, we've seen 8 days in the last 16 months where, in the absence of those reliable operations, we would have been in emergency conditions. So for $1.25 a month per household, we think it's a pretty good deal for Texans to keep the grid reliable, stay out of emergency conditions for a very small price to pay.
Do you guys have a status update on the issuance of the securitization loans? Have those all been divvied out? Is that even something you guys are overseeing?
ERCOT's overseeing that. I don't know the status of the distribution of proceeds. We conducted the first the bond sale in June, and it's in process. I don't know the current status of the distribution of those, but we can certainly get that information for you.
Do you know how long that would take, or is it just kind of, who knows?
I mean, once the initial process is kicked off, it'll be initial distribution proceeds and then repayment of that debt service over a period of many years. So it'll be an ongoing effort.
As reforms continue, do you intend to make any changes to staffing or operations at ERCOT?
So we'll always be looking at what's needed in terms of staffing and making sure that we're staffing for the reliability needs of the system. As we look to the next set of changes that are going to be part of this phase 2, we'll see what kind of investments we need to make in the organization to be able to make those changes as quickly and as reliably as we can, because one of our goals is to not only execute and implement this new market model, but to do it in as rapid a fashion as we can, so we can see the benefits of that coming out as quickly as possible. But we're always looking at the staffing needs of the organization and making sure that we have the right people to perform the work that's needed to be done.
Right. Do you think the implementation of phase 2, do you think that will spur any need for more staffing, or like how are you looking at that implementation?
We'll have to wait to see kind of what that new design and what the new market model requires in terms of both technology and process changes. Once we have a better understanding of kind of how that's going to materialize, we'll be able to come out and let you know what that's going to mean in terms of changes to ERCOT to meet those new requirements.
You got a letter yesterday, maybe it was today, from Senator Elizabeth Warren regarding cryptocurrency mining in Texas, which she called some questions to that about the use of energy, the amount of energy that they're using. I'm curious what your reaction is to that letter and how you foresee cryptocurrency mining in the future of the ERCOT grid.
So we want to be able to serve any business that wants to do business in Texas, and that includes crypto miners. So we look forward to responding to Senator Warren's and the other legislators' questions about how we are serving the needs of the businesses in Texas, including crypto miners. I think there were some perspectives that were implied in that letter that were not accurate, where the state of Texas does not subsidize crypto mining above any other industry. Crypto miners, along with every other large energy user in the state of Texas, has the ability to take advantage of ancillary services and other products in the ERCOT market that are part of operating large loads in the state of Texas in ERCOT. And so they take advantage of those like a steel refiner would or a car manufacturer would. They have the same right to do that as anybody else. They don't get any special subsidy for doing so. They participate in the market. And so we look forward to answering the questions and explaining how we serve these types of businesses here.
Do we have any questions from the phone line?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 1 then 0 on your telephone keypad. You may withdraw your question at any time by repeating the command of 1 then 0. Give me just a few moments while we collect our names.
Any other questions in the room while we wait?
Mr. Vegas, are you by chance fluent in Spanish, and would you be available to make some comments for Telemundo now or after?
So I spoke Spanish growing up as a child. I moved here to the States when I was relatively young, so my fluency is based on that of maybe around an 11-year-old. So my Spanish vocabulary is a really good vocabulary for an 11-year-old. When it gets into business vernacular, it's not as great. So I'm comfortable reading and writing and all that, but live interviews in Spanish tend to be a little bit more difficult, especially on energy subjects that are have a higher vocabulary.
I have another question. After the storm, it was talked about that it could have helped if some of these power plants maybe had coverings over them, a simple fix. Has that ever been done, or is that true that covering them and making sure they don't get frozen over would help in the future freezes?
We had weatherization requirements in place by December of last year, so going into the winter of 2022, the first winter after Uri, all of our generators had new winterization requirements that it can, in certain circumstances, include coverings, insulation, heat tracing on water pipes, windbreaks to protect critical parts of the plant. We required generators to winterize to ensure operations. We didn't designate any particular method of winterization, but we made sure that going into this most recent winter, our entire generation fleet was winterized. It was ready for cold weather operations. And ERCOT stood up an inspection crew and did a very thorough audit of a good chunk of our generators. And we saw the results last winter. Our generators stayed online and the lights stayed on.
Even though there were some very cold days last winter, it wasn't as bad as 2021. Are you confident that the weatherization that has been done will be able to stand up to another storm as bad as the one we saw a year and a half ago?
Absolutely, and it's not just one tool or one reform, it's the combination of all of these reforms, and the whole of these reforms is greater than the sum of the parts. It's the winterization, it's the increased margin of safety in the reliable operations, it's better coordination with natural gas, ensuring the pipelines and processing plants stay on. It's all of the above, and in combination, yes, absolutely. Our grid would be ready for, and is ready for whatever Mother Nature throws at us.
We ready on the phones? Any questions?
Yes, our first question comes from the line of Noreen Malik. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thanks for taking questions. So one really quick follow-up on the letter from Senator Warren. When are you planning to respond to that? Just timeline, and then I have a real question.
We'll plan to respond to that in the coming weeks.
Okay, and then just going back to the phase one reforms, I think the estimate is that the higher costs for ancillary services and everything, about $800 to $1 billion extra cost to consumers this year. Why? So I point that out because all this extra money is going to generators as an incentive to hopefully build new generation. But and plants have been building record or making record profits this summer, but we're not really seeing an increase in new fossil fuel generation. Why is that?
So first of all, that $1 billion cost increase was a hypothetical number offered as part of almost an academic study. It was not the actual spend. That was purely hypothetical. The actual spend is a much, much lower number. And that number is reflected in the $1.25 per household per month cost. That's the actual cost that has been incurred for ERCOT customers in Texas. And again, I think that's a great deal. Staying out of emergency conditions 8 times for $1.25 each month is a great deal for Texans who told us loud and clear after Winter Storm Uri, we do not want the lights to ever go out again. And we're delivering on that. In terms of more dispatchable generation being built in Texas, you're right, we don't have enough dispatchable generation being built in Texas, and that's why we're moving forward at great haste with phase 2. We need to redesign this marketplace to incentivize more dispatchable on-demand power, and that's what phase 2 is designed to do.
Next question on the phone.
That question comes from the line of Bob Sector. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is a question for Mr. Vegas. Mr. Lake began the press conference by, describing the grid as more reliable than ever, than it ever has been. I was just wondering if you agree with that, and also just as a follow-up, the polls show that Texans don't agree with that. So I'm just curious why you think there's a disconnect there, and what can be done about it.
Well, as I pointed out earlier, the key to rebuilding confidence in the electric grid is going to be continued reliable execution and operations. That's our collective focus at ERCOT. So we will focus all of our work and all of our efforts to ensure that that consistency continues to be the hallmark of what people can expect from ERCOT's electric grid operations. The grid is more reliable. The weatherization efforts we have made have had a real impact, and those are affecting the generation and transmission elements within the electric grid. That does make the grid more reliable. The way we're operating the grid is more reliable. We are using ancillary services in a way to ensure that they are ready to perform at points in time before the grid gets too tight and we would have to get into a more precarious emergency scenario. We are bringing resources online earlier so that there's always cushion and reserve available should something change in the conditions of the grid at any point in time. So the way we operate the grid is more reliable. The changes that have been made make the grid more reliable, and by continuing to execute and meet the demands and the tests that are coming our way, that will build a confidence in everyday Texans that their grid is and will continue to be reliable.
Thank you.
And our last question from the phone lines is from Shelby Webb. Please go ahead.
Hi. So this 120
$1.25 a month figure has been thrown around a lot. I was wondering if y'all would be able to share, maybe off the conversation, any data to support that, the actual spending that ERCOT has done that shows it was $1.25. And I guess for a question now, how have you figured that the numbers that independent market monitor came up with is more of a hypothetical exercise? Like what data was she using that suggests that she wasn't using actual ERCOT data to come up with her $1 billion figure?
So on your first question about the data related to the $1.25, ERCOT will make that available publicly. Regarding the second question about the hypothetical billions and billions of dollars that the reliable operations have caused, that's based off of the RDPA, the Reliability Deployment Price Adder, which is triggered anytime we RUC a unit. But importantly, we are RUCking these units, which means bringing more generation on sooner rather than later, which is very deliberate. That's part of how we're making the grid more reliable. We're moving away from the old crisis-based business model into a reliability-based business model. We're turning on generators sooner rather than later. We're not going to let the reserves get too low. Every time a unit is RUC'd, that RDPA is triggered, and the calculus that goes into that $1 billion a year assumes that every time that price adder, that RDPA is added, that it's a big number. But a lot of the times when we RUC, it's when we have sufficient reserves, which we want to maintain sufficient reserves, and that price adder in reality is maybe a few cents. So that's a big discrepancy in the analysis.
Well, sure, but it's not necessarily just, the price adder. It's also the changes to the ORDC curve and things like that. I mean, is that hypothetical as well, or is the main sort of point of difference here just that, perhaps the independent market monitor is using, maybe an inflated RFPA number?
Sure. The ORDC curve was steepened and moved out from to a higher level of reserves when it reaches HCAP, but we also at the same time lowered the highest price possible from 9,000 to 5,000. That's almost a 50% reduction in the highest price possible in ERCOT. And even though we steepened the ORDC curve, at the same time, we're bringing on more ancillary services and using that RUC tool to bring more units online sooner rather than later, which brings more supply online, which suppresses prices. And so by being more reliable overall, there are trade-offs between the tools. Some of them sometimes add costs, but at other times we have more supply and that depresses costs. And so at the end of the day, when it all comes out in the wash, it ends up being, the actual dollar spent ends up being about $1.25 per household per month. And we'll make sure you got that data.
Great. And just one final question. So, we've been talking about phase 2 market redesign for the better part of almost a year now, but it appears that, we won't get, the E3 study of the proposals as well as, maybe the potential blueprint or what we're looking at until after the election. Is that coincidental timing, or is that something that, folks don't want to use as a distraction?
Our goal on delivering phase 2 is as soon as possible. We have been hustling and working intensely to get this phase 2 redesign finished, and we'll get it issued publicly as soon as possible. Right now, is
there a timeline for that?
It's consistent with our timeline that we've been working on since the blueprint was adopted, aiming for mid-November. Might be a little later. There's a lot of work and a lot of analysis that goes into this, but we're going to get it out there as soon as possible. And then there will be a public comment period, and of course we'll, as a commission, consider all of those comments and make any changes we need. But the goal is as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the phone?
At this time, there are no other questions in queue.
Anybody else here?
Do you foresee asking the legislature to perhaps to create any sort of bills that will allow you to further the action in response to just the overall reforms in response to the near collapse during Winter Storm Uri?
The reforms passed last session in a matter of 60 days by the legislature were once-in-a-generation reforms. We've implemented them at a breakneck pace, and we plan on presenting the results of Phase 2 market redesign to the legislature in January. From there, the direction they want to take is up to them. If they tell us to go plug it in, we will. If they want to go a different direction, I'm highly confident they'll let us know.
One other question. You mentioned the maintenance scheduling reform being new this fall. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like, how it looks like for implementation this fall compared to previous year with maintenance scheduling?
I mean, quite simply, generators in the past could pick any day to bring, or any series of days or weeks to bring their generators offline. And so it was just by happenstance. And ERCOT didn't have any control or ability to influence that. So some weeks we'd have 20,000 megawatts out, 25,000 megawatts out, 30,000 megawatts out on planned outage, on maintenance outages, which of course leaves the grid in a somewhat precarious position. As part of the new reforms, ERCOT can now say there's a cap on any given week. And so we will not allow any more than a certain number of megawatts outage. And overall, the generators have more hours than they actually need to perform the maintenance. We're just requiring them to spread it out over multiple weeks instead of all at once. And we're seeing the benefits of that.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks.
Thanks for sticking with us here on KXAN Live. Will Dupree back in the KXAN Live studio as we've come to a conclusion of this news conference called on behalf of the new president and CEO of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, what we all know it as, and the chairman of the Public Utility Commission of Texas. Pablo Vegas is that new leader of ERCOT, brought on at the beginning of this month. So he's been, at that job for a little bit, about 2 weeks or so. But he basically was introducing himself to Texans because this is the first time he's speaking publicly to many people out there. And of course, he's going to be facing a lot of scrutiny after what happened during last February's winter storm. There are a number of reforms that have been passed, and as he noted, throughout this time since that storm, the grid has not had to enter into emergency conditions. Yes, there have been conservation alerts put out there asking people to watch how much energy they're using based on what the grid conditions are, but the two men who spoke just a few moments ago noted that we did not have to go into any emergency conditions where outages were mandated to keep the grid in balance. And what they're going to be tracking is and trying to rebuild the trust that a lot of people have lost in that organization as it manages the power grid. So we have more coverage about everything from the winter storm to what's ensued about the reforms that passed during the last legislative session. You can find that at KXAN.com. And of course, we'll keep tracking this story as more developments are shared. Thank you all again for watching here this afternoon. We'll see you back here at another time. I'm Will Dupree in the KXAN Live studio. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Stay safe and take care.